All right, so we're going to build in the ability for the user. Now that they log in, we want them to automatically route to a to-do page, and then we will start building out that to-do page. So I have my to-do page here. I'm just going to write the word to-do page so I know my routing works. If I see this on the screen, it should show up as soon as I log in here, or if I have a token and visit my website, I should automatically go here. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to my app.js and import that component. I'll import to-do list from the to-do list directory. I'm not going to say .js because that's not a file, it's a folder that has an index.js in it. And then I'm going to make another route. Route path is to-do and render the same syntax here. And what we'll render on this page is the to-do list. And we're going to send it everything from router props. We might as well send it from everything from this.props as well, because that's going to include logout token, all the methods and things from our context. So let's just send that all down as well. Props. So this page receives anything, everything. Let's see. Unexpected token. I'm missing something. Close the route. All right, but this is an issue. I am not logged in yet, but if I knew this website and wanted to break in, it wouldn't be too hard at this point. I could say, you know what, skip the login thing. Let me just type in to-dos and go to that page. We don't want this to happen. If they try to go to this page without logging in, they should be thrown right back to our login page. So we're going to introduce, oh puppy, we're going to introduce a component from React Router we haven't seen yet. Everyone needs puppy time. You're just excited as you are. Okay. All right, so what I want to do, the reason why I'm using the word render throughout the course instead of component has really been for this purpose, what we're finally getting to now. Because what this allows me to do is not, I don't have to immediately return a component, I can return a terminal, say load the following components depending on my data. Mostly dependent on, do I have a token or not? And if I do, let them through. If I don't, send them back here. So there's a component in React Router called redirect that will power this. And it does exactly what it says. It redirects them to a different route whenever it's called or used. So this to-do page, we're going to say render the to-do list only under certain circumstances, though. The first thing we're going to say is there a token? If there is a token, then load this to-do list page. But if there is not a token, else, let's redirect. Now, redirect is a concept that needs one prop to function. I'm going to tab these over. It needs a prop too. And in here, you just put the path, the route we want to redirect them to. So I'll say /. So if they have to look at that, go ahead and load the to-do list. If they don't, redirect them home. So just with this change, if I try to go to the to-dos page now and hit enter, I'm sent right back to the login page. It's now controlled, it's protected. Well, another thing should happen. When I say login, this is a successful login. As we know, it's a logout button to shut up. But what would you expect to have happen when I log in or sign up? Yeah, I should get routed to this page. So I can repeat the similar statement here, but I'll ask if there is not a token, then load the auth page. What? Yeah. But if there is a token, go ahead and redirect them to the to-dos page. Now when this page refreshes, it's automatically on the to-do page. What's really cool about this, login does a set state, right? It releases the user information in state, which will cause a rerun of my app, which will cause the routes to get reevaluated. So logging in will then automatically route me back to the login page. If the token isn't there, this gets reevaluated. And it's like, no, they don't have a token now. Go back to the home page. So this brings up a concept called protected routes. And basically, protected routes is a front-end term saying you should only be able to access this front-end route if you have the required information, in our instance, a token. Is our authentication page a protected route? Right, that's the only thing in this app that's not protected. We want everyone to be able to go to this page if they're not logged in yet. It's the to-dos page, and maybe later we'd make like a profile page. Those would all be protected. They need a token to get to. Now you can write the same logic every single time you load my component or redirect, or you can modularize this, turn it into its own component called protected route, and then just reuse your own code. So for the sake of seeing that, we're going to create a component called protected route. We'll go to our shared folder finally, and then create protected route.js. Protected. This will need React, and it will need route and redirect from React router. And just to clarify what I'm doing, I'm basically taking this logic here and making it dynamic, making it general so I can reuse it without having to type this every time I need a protected route on my front end. So const protected route is a component that takes some props and returns something. A protected route is going to do exactly what this route is doing. It's going to check for a token. If the token exists, it's going to load the component we're intending to load. If it doesn't exist, then it's going to redirect them to the home page. We're just going to duplicate this logic so we don't have to repeat ourselves further on. So the shared folder source. I've got components, context, and shared. I'm putting protected route in shared because it is a shared, kind of like a render prop in the sense that I can reuse it over and over again for some purposes. But okay, so this route's going to have to take a couple props. It's going to have to know whether or not there's a token, so we'll give that to it. It'll need to know what path we're trying to access. It needs to know where to redirect to if the token doesn't exist. It needs to know which component to load. And in case you want to pass props to our component that's loading, it needs to be able to take some props. I'm going to call this rest. The rest of the things that our component might need. In this instance, this is the almost like a rest operator. We're getting an array of the rest of the things so that we can pass it forward if needed. But this is everything for us to need, just like we wrote it here. It needs to know where we're going, do we have a token, what component to load, what props does it need, and where should it redirect to. So all this data needs to be able to be passed down to things reusable. And then we can pretty much restate what we did on the other file. We can ask if there's a token, then load the route, otherwise redirect. So the route, we need a path. We're not going to hard code the path here. We're going to pass it down as a prop. So the path will be the path we give it from props. And the component it loads is the component we pass down as well. And I'm going to rename this as a C, because that's the syntax we're used to. So load my component. Otherwise, redirect to my redirect to. And I've kind of condensed this logic into its own little component that I can now replace this entire block of code with as a protected route. We're missing one piece. What if we pass more props? Right now with the component keyword, we can't pass props to this. So we're just going to keep using render forever, ever and always. Let's load our component and let's give it everything it may have been passed when we use the protected route. and the router props. Now, it's hard to see it because all the words are general, but this is the exact same logic we have right here. But now instead of saying all this, what we can do is import protected route from our shared folder. And we'll say protected route. And it needs a couple props, the props that we defined. I'm going to comment this out now because this route's going to replace it. So what props do I need to give protected route? Token, path, redirect to, component, and the rest. So token is our token. Path, in this case, our path is /todos. The component to load is our to-do list, so I'll pass that down. The redirect to, we want to redirect them to /. So I'll put that in, and then I could give more props here as necessary, like I wanted to pass the user down. I could do that. And what this will show up as is rest, and then we're spreading that into the component so it still receives it. Right, this is spreading all the contents of that object into this destructured object, and then we are spilling it back into the component. And with that, I can now delete this, and that is my whole route. So as you're building your routes, you'll kind of end up with this effect. Now this page to to-dos, this page is going to be to profile, and it will load the profile component and so forth. So anything that's protected, we can just use this, give it the token, and it will evaluate and redirect them to this first route if necessary. Okay, so that's protected route. And since this is kind of spread out, I'm going to put them on the same listed line like this, so it's a little bit easier to follow down the page. Whoa, okay. So I have route 1 and route 2. Any questions on protected routes? Is this absolutely necessary to build? No, it's like render props. So if this doesn't make sense, then just do it in line like we did. You know, when you ask the question, load one or the other. But you'll find yourself with more complex apps rewriting this process 5 or 6 times. Like, you know what, when I'm doing that, just like forms, let's condense it into one component and just reuse it. And that's how you make your app more scalable. If anything on your protected routes breaks, you have one component to look at versus 100 lines of code. Okay, protected route. And let's make sure it still works. We're gonna log in as AA, log in, and here we are, to-do page. We'll log out, and we're sent back. Everything's automatic now. So now we get to move on to the to-do page and make that work for the user.
That you were like doing renders, so that you could do experiment.
Yeah.
Like, so does that mean that there's another way of passing props? If we just do it?
Yeah, you can't pass props if you use the component syntax.
So that,
And that's why this protected route component I built, I gave it the ability to accept any amount of props past these required ones. So give me anything else on top of this, and I'll pass them forward to the component that gets loaded. Which, this is kind of interesting, right? We just wrote our own component that takes a prop called component, just like route does when you first learned it. It's no different. They wrote the route component that accepts a component prop. Well, we just did that. We duplicated it. We renamed it as uppercase C and then referred it to it as that there. Okay, so the to-do page is going to be 2 parts. It's going to have a form at the very top, so you can add a new to-do, and then directly below it, we'll list them out. So let's import our to-do form. Put that first. and it'll be at the top of the page. Now we're not using render prop, so what do I need to introduce to this component to make this work? What does my to-do form need to work? It needs its own handle submit, its own handle change, its own state, because we're not using our reusable render prop components. So let's write it out. Structure, super, and state. It'll just keep track of the title because that's all our to-do list does. We'll have a handle change, which is no different than the one earlier. And our handle submit. I can now pass these three down as props to my form. And I'm also going to do a button text prop because later, what else could we use this form for? Could we reuse this form component later for any purpose? Edits, yeah. Same inputs, all it needs is a different handle submit. So we want to be able to reuse this if possible. So now let's go plug all these props into the to-do form. So we'll destructure here, handle change, handle submit, title and button text. Great. Let's log in to see if that form shows up now. So we should be routed to the page and see our form. Oops, log in. Great. Our to-do form with all of our favorite to-dos. And log out is showing. All right, so what needs to happen on handle submit of this form? Hopefully we're going to add a to-do because that's what the button says. So they're going to trust us that that's what's going to happen. So this is in the point of your application where you get to choose. Do I want more than one context, or can I manage everything that I'm doing in the context I currently have? Now, if this was going to be an application to where there was like 15 different things you could do with each to-do, then for sure put it in its own context just to keep the methods separate and easier to maintain. But since we're only working at the very most get, post, put, delete, we're just going to combine it with our user provider because it's a user action anyway. For this application, you have to be logged in to get your to-dos and do anything with it. So in our user provider, we're also going to now maintain an array of to-dos. And this will only ever be the to-dos from this specific user. So we have our user auth methods. Now we can add get to-dos, or I'll say get user to-dos, and add to-do. Before I forget, I'm going to make sure those methods are being provided. Cool, so let's work on the post first because we won't be able to see anything until we post anyways. And that's what we're building out here. So now that we have this set up, what will handle submit need to call? So to-do list component, it's for adding to-dos. Which method should it call? Yes, it's for adding to-dos. It's going to call this method. And just like our login and our sign up that accepted credentials, our add to-do is going to expect the new to-do object to go post to the database the same way. So I'll go back here, and it doesn't look like we're consuming, but if we recall, we move up a level, we're passing the user down to our to-do page. let's also get the add to do method, because if your app is consuming our context, it has access to everything, and we'll pass add to do down as well as a prop to this route. If I wanted to, I could forego this and just connect this page to my context as well. So that's up to you. Do you want to pass props or connect multiple pages? But now I have a this.props.add-to-do I can call and handle submit. And where is my new to-do information going to be stored that I need to send? Where is my object that will have this new title in it? Local state. That's the state coming from this form. So this will get updated by the handle change, and then we'll submit this dot state, which is the exact same in this case as saying const new to do is an object with the title from this dot state dot title. This object and this object in this case are the exact same, so I can forego creating it and just send my state object. Then just for the cleanup, we will set state to set the input back to an empty string. All right, so add to do will receive the new to do, and at this point, when I'm getting to this point in my application, I will console log every step of the way the first time. So first I want to see, does my new to do even make it to this point? Open this, go to console, say newest to do, add to do, great. I'm getting my new to do object. So now I can send it to the database. I know it's making it this far. So before we send in this request, is there any question on this setup? What we did here? Okay. Then let's post our new to do. You know, we run into this just like with the sign up. We're like, great, it's going to be an axios.post. What is the endpoint for this? Well, it's been so long since I built my server. I'm going to go check. And I see, okay, the endpoint is /API/to-do. Then I go to the routes. And for post, it's just /. So that's the whole endpoint. /API/to-dos. And then I'll send the new to-do as the request body. Just like any other request, I want to console log my responses first to make sure they're working, because we're going to run into something kind of fun when we try this now. So my first to do, add, and I get a 401 unauthorized. First and foremost, where could I look to see more about this specific error besides opening it here and just being confused by what it's saying? Yeah, I'd pop open the terminal, check the server to see, did you give me anything? And it did. It gave me a lot of stuff. What is it saying the error was? No authorization token was found. What threw this error? In my server, what got triggered that made this error actually occur? Our gatekeeper. My post request went to /API/to-do, but to get here, it first had to go through this. An express jot checked the request, saw that there was no token, and immediately quit the server process and said, no, you're not authorized. Send me a token next time, or something like that. So we need to add a token. Well, when we're in Postman, how are we adding the token to requests? Headers, authorization, then you say capital B bearer space, and then the token. So we need to do this exact same syntax, but using Axios. We need to get this added to our get and post request. Now you can do this on every single request in Axios. I could add another object here and say headers, and then say you're gonna have an authorization header equal to the token. but I don't want to have to write this on every single request that needs a token. So we're going to look at a new method inside of Axios called axios.create. And we're going to make our own little version of Axios. I'm going to call this user Axios equals axios.create. And what this does is it duplicates this package and saves it in a new variable. And the reason we do this is we can now configure this to have some like preset headers and configuration that Axios doesn't have by default. So we can add the token to every request, and all we have to do is use this word to make an authorized request. The way we do this is through something called an Axios interceptor. It's kind of like a middleware. It fires when it needs to configure Axios and use it appropriately. So we'll say user Axios, add an interceptor for requests, and then we use the following configuration. So whenever this Axios sends a request, intercept it before it goes out and use the following configuration. Is how you kind of want to read this. And this is where we're going to add the authorization header. Well, we need the token for that. So where do we have the token currently if they're logged in? Local storage. We'll grab the token from local storage.getItem token. Now we need to add it as a header to this Axios instance. So we'll say config, which this is the configuration object for this Axios. You're going to have headers. One of them will be capital A, authorization, and it is equal to the string bearer token. And that is adding what we typed manually here. We're just now implementing it into Axios. So once that configuration is done, we could add a bunch more if we needed to, but as soon as you're done configuring the Axios, you just return the configuration. And now all I need to do for add to do is change the word axios.post to user axios.post, and now it has the token in the header. So let's try sending this one more time and answer any questions. These work. Add to do. 404 not found. That was not what I was expecting, but let's say API to-dos, API to-do. There's our problem. Leave off the S. Please work. Hey, hey, hey. Now, whose ID is that? You don't know me? Yeah. It is, we know who it is. We can go to application local storage and it is password A, username A. It's their ID. So if we look at that, it ends in FFC21. We go and look at the to-do they just added and it has a .user equal to the last 5 FFC21. So their ID was saved. And this is that whole big process because at the very beginning when they logged in, the token we sent them has their user information encoded in it. So when they send it back, this decrypts it, creates the requesting user object, and then the to-do post adds it in our to-do router. One thing. Yeah, any questions on sending the token in this request? Or what magic is happening here? Or would it help to follow the logic all the way through again?
Can you go back to the server.js?
Yes.
Just going back to the API and then the auth in between. Is that just what you call that?
Yeah, so the reason why we set this up on this endpoint, we're saying any endpoint that begins with /API has to use this first. When we send sign up or login, it doesn't trigger this. It just skips over it because it's a middleware. It will only happen when a request begins with that endpoint. So auth, not protected. So here's how you get your token. then going forward, you got to send the token back to get anywhere else. So we're saying, hey, for anything that needs authentication, use this version of Axios that has the header all set up from local storage. So for sign up and login, we're just using regular Axios because no tokens needed. But for authorized requests, we're using the one we set up that has the token in the header. Well, then if we know response.data is the new to-do, that's working fine. Where should we put it? And we're gonna add it to the array of to-dos. We don't want to erase anything that was there before. So we'll grab previous state and say update to-dos to be everything from prev state.todos, and the response.data is the new to-do. Maybe that looks a little strange to have them on different lines or not have them on different lines, so we'll do that. So new to-do is the object before it's in the database. Response.data is the new to-do that came back with the ID and the user ID attached. So that's what we're adding here. And if it's easier to see, we could always say const saved to-do equals res.data and add the saved to-do to the array of to-dos we're currently maintaining. Right now we're not because we haven't even got the user to-dos, but now we can because they have to-dos.
Using the user Axios, just to make sure that it's only
The big point of that is to make sure there's a token on the request, or else you'd have to add it manually on every single request you write. If we can just configure our own version, then we never have to worry about adding it over and over again. It may not always be just to get the users to do's, because you think about Instagram, the public page you go to see everyone else's posts, you can't even get to that unless you're logged in. So there's an instance of having to have a token to see other people's info. It's not always just to see your own, but it definitely helps with that. Okay, get to-dos. Do we need regular Axios or user Axios to get users to-dos? User Axios, because this is secure data, it's private. Don't let anyone get it. We'll get a response back and we'll console log it, or we'll get an error. My question is, where do we want to call this? When do we want to get the users to-dos? Yeah, so they log in, they're on the auth page. Where do they go to immediately once they log in? The to-do page. So why don't we, as soon as this component mounts, do a component did mount get request and just call get user to-dos. And then we can map them out down below the form here. So I'll add a component did mount to my to-do list page. But it is not connected to context. App so far is the only thing connected to context. So using this pattern, just like I passed down these two pieces of data, I need to get this from context, get user to-dos, I think is what we called it. Yep. Oops. Get user to-dos, and then we'll pass it as a prop to our protected route. Great. Now our to-do page will load, and on component did mount, we'll call this.props.get user to-dos. This will go get the array of to-dos, and now we can test it by console logging response, which should have already happened because we're on the to-do page. So open up console, and we have a 500 internal server error. Where do I look to see what went wrong? The server terminal again. It didn't give me anything. Let's try again. Hey, it worked, cool. That was just a refresh issue then. We made it out alive. So we look at response.data. There's the 4 to-dos I've added. My first to-do, my second to-do, my third to-do, and please work. But they all have the same user ID attached. That is the ID of the user that is currently logged in. So now it's all about making these things show up, right? This is really exciting stuff, I guess. Okay, so let's save it in state. This dot set state. We'll say to-dos is response.data. And we're good. Just double check this page. We're getting the to-dos. But again, I am not consuming context on this page. So my to-dos that are sitting here in the provider need to be passed down as well. And since app is still the only thing actually consuming, I need to get the props out of here. And I need to pass them down to that page. And now this is up to you, really. Like, you don't have to do all these as props. You could forego this and then connect this page to context as well. There is no difference between the two. I personally like doing this on app. So the top of app shows me everything I'm pulling from context, and then I can look at each route to see which one is using what. Personal preference, one way of doing it. So now it's getting this.props.todos instead of to-do list. I really like destructuring, so I'm going to grab to-dos from this.props. And below my to-do form, I'll just map them out right in line. To-dos.map for each to-do. Right now, let's just load an H1 that has the to-do.title and a key of to-do._ID. Now this is having a little bit of a lag with the refresh, so I'll hit enter to refresh manually. And they're there. But something magical has happened. If I log out and I sign up as GG, there's nothing. GG's. Dang it. GG's first to do. Really, it's the second. Dang it. So he adds a bunch of to-dos, and then someone else comes and logs back in as AA. They get their to-dos. You could do this all day. It never gets boring. Oh, it gets boring pretty quick, but isn't that satisfying? It only took us like 4 hours.
So is this say it's only now? So it's
What? I missed the punchline somewhere. But wait, there's more. Not a whole lot more. There is 1 or 2 things we should cover. For part 2, yeah.
If you want to get
Everyone's to-dos, then I'd maybe make a public page where you go to that does a GET request just using, you'll still need a token, but my route wouldn't look like this. Right now, I'm only getting the user's to-dos because remember, I'm saying to-do.find all to-dos that have a .user equal to the requesting user's ID. If I get rid of this object, now I'm getting everybody's to-dos. So I can make a route for get all by user, then I could duplicate this route, change the endpoint to maybe public, remove the filtering, and now I have a route for getting everyone else's to-dos as well for a public page. So once you get the logic worked out, it's not hard to expand on it. Just a couple tweaks. I'd have to build another page, like the public to-do page where you can view everybody's to-dos. Just like this page calls component amount get user to-dos, my other page would say component amount get all to-dos. And I'd save that in state and map them out. I'm gonna comment that out. Okay. Well, Nate brought up a good point at the beginning of this one. What if I log in, a login, and then I leave my browser? And later I come in back to my browser, and I go back to the website, will I still be logged in? Yes. Why am I still logged in? Yeah, I didn't click log out, so local storage still remembers. It forgets, but it never forgives, or something like that. So we need to log them out if they forget to do it. And app.js is a great place to do this again because app.js will never unmount until the website is left, because the entire website lives inside of app.js. The switch statement shows every page. So on component will unmount. If they have not logged out, I will do it for them. And let's refresh to get our to-dos. And now I'm going to leave the page, reopen a browser and come back. Dang it. Component will unmount. Huh. Why work? The logout function deletes local storage and resets state. I mean, I know if we went to another page like google.com and went back to localhost, what? Huh. Put a pin in that because something's not working. Component will. Problem is, how do you console log something to see if it's happening if it only happens when you close the page? No, that's the only lifecycle method for it leaving the DOM. Let's put a pin on that. I'll come back to it. I swear that's how I've done it in the past. But I wonder, let's see. Which this should be the exact same thing as calling that function. I just want to see if something's not happening we expected it to. So we're still logged in. I will leave the page completely. Pretty sure we don't have any other React windows open. We don't, so now we'll go back to local storage or local host. 3000. Yeah, something weird's happening, so. Well, this is for when it's in the browser. It's saying when it leaves the browser, run this, even though the server's still going. I'll double check on that. Is there anything else? Oh, sure. Let's say we're building out our app later. This will be a bit more conceptual. Just to show you the power of dynamic rendering with user authentication. So right now we're only displaying the logout button if they're logged in. So the navbar isn't even showing up on this page until they log in. Even though it's there, it's just empty until we have a token. But what if we have other links in here? Like link to your profile page. It doesn't exist yet, but now when I log out, it's still showing profile there. So I really need to think about what I want to dynamically render and how, because I could wrap every one of these in their own conditional statement. You know, if there is a token, show this. If there isn't a token, show the login button. That's all totally fine. Or you can move it up a level and say, you know what, don't show the entire navbar unless there is a token. Like that. And now until there's a token, we see no navigation ability. And we log in, there's our navigation. So lots of different ways to do this. You can do every single one inline, or you can choose to do the whole nav bar, depending on what your app is doing. So now with this, I wouldn't even need this statement. Great, so we've come a long way. We have what looks like user authentication. And tomorrow we'll look at part 3. It'll probably be a little bit later in the day tomorrow. But what is still unsecure about this? What do we need to fix?
Token visible to anyone viewing
The user's password.
Yeah, so it's fine if the token's available because it's not meant to keep stuff secure. It's more to make sure the request is secure. But this is a big problem. Password. So part 3 is going to be a couple parts, but what it will cover is, well, let's look at this too. I'm going to Compass. Hopefully you've been using Compass a little bit. It's super helpful. And in the next part, we're going to have to delete our database, so you'll have to have Compass by then. Connect, find the database, to-dos. So if I go into my database, if someone were to break into MongoDB Compass, they have everyone's password as a plain text password. It's very dangerous as well. Even though we trust MongoDB to be secure, as we know, any company can be hacked. So we're not even going to save their plain text password. We're going to hash their password on signup and only save the hashed password. It'll look something like this. This is what will be saved in the database. And then we'll use that same package when they log in to decrypt the password from the database and compare it to their plain text password. And then write some little helper methods like check password and without password that will strip it out before it sends that response to the front end. So most of part 3 is dealing with making it secure with passwords, but then we'll also handle errors better. You know, if I'm on my front page here and I try to sign up as AA and click sign up, why didn't it route me? That username already exists, but does the user know that? No, we need to see that error message. So we're going to talk about that as well, how to make the little error message show up so they actually know what's going on. And we already did protected routes, so we're good. So yeah, tomorrow's password encryption and error handling.